Okay, hi. This is going to be my first review on the Brian Blade album Landmarks, which came out in 2014. Landmarks features Brian Blade on drums, Melvin Butler on the soprano and tenor saxophones, John Cowherd on the piano, and a few other instruments, including the pump organ at one point, Chris Thomas on the bass, Myron Walden on the alto saxophone and the bass clarinet, and then you've got Jeff Parker and Marvin Sewell on guitar, switching off on a few of the tracks, though they're not as central to the band as the other people mentioned. So with Brian Blade and the Fellowship Band, they've been around since I believe the late '90s, and consistently been putting out some really quality records. Season of Changes was the one that really got me into them originally. And while I kind of listened to some of their other stuff, the main album of theirs I was really listening to was Season of Changes, which I'll probably do a review for at some point. It's a beautiful, amazing album, and kind of I think really gets at like what their sound is at its best. And that album really had a lot of different styles of their music on it. It wasn't just one kind of main style. It wasn't just kind of like one thought. It was really a lot of the different things that they consistently do. And this album, Landmarks, their most recent release from 2014, really kind of, it's in some ways the opposite of Season of Changes in that sense, in that it really kind of sticks to one idea. This album's really kind of like, well, it's kind of similar to some other albums, such as, I mean, not on the level of A Love Supreme, but similar to A Love Supreme or some others in the sense that it really is kind of one consistent listen. Like, sure, the songs can be listened to individually. Landmarks on its own, the title song, I hear all the time, is separately from this album. But really, when you listen to this whole album straight through, you can tell that Blade and the Fellowship Band really kind of were meaning for this album to truly be listened to full way through. And so to kind of get into that, the form of the album, it's really kind of, a lot of the songs to me personally sounded a lot like they were very wholesome to me. The songs had a very, very wholesome sound, and they kind of had this very they kind of reminded me a lot of hymns or marching pieces. They were very kind of like, they had this consistent kind of groove, which was just going and pushing. And typically, the horns had this role, while the rhythm section was just kind of had this kind of like consistent push, which it sometimes would ramp up or would kind of fall back. The horns on this album, which were most of the time the bass clarinet and the saxophone, really had the role of providing almost more of backings to a lot of time John Cowherd on piano. Their backings would be the melody to the song. Technically, you would officially really look at that as the melody, but really this band, while a lot of the time one person might technically be playing the melody or really taking a solo, the way that this band works, it really is more of just kind of one progression. The horns are playing the melody, but they're really just pushing along the song with the rhythm section. And I'm probably going to continue to use all these kind of like metaphors of pushing and marching, because to me this album, while it may sound kind of negative, made me think of something of a funeral or a reflection on death or something like that, because it really, a lot of it had this kind of very slow, reflective push. And on one song in particular, let's see, I wrote this down. It was He Died Fighting, which is just about halfway through the album. It's a beautiful song, possibly one of my favorites on the album. There's this one point where there's a sax solo, and the rhythm section is really just keeping this like constant groove going, but the sax is just soaring over it. And while the rhythm section is still keeping this one groove going, They are ramping up. They're keeping the exact same groove going, but they're just kind of ramping up with the sax solo. And to me, it just conjured this image of in my mind of as everybody else going through this procession, this one person who's just crying in despair or reflection or something. I don't know. It's just how I'm thinking about it. But as you can probably get from that, I really found some of that aspect of this album really beautiful. It was there's it at some points it reminded me a bit of the works of John Coltrane when he collaborated with Eric Dolphy, specifically because of the bass clarinet and the soprano saxophone. With, of course, if you listen to recordings like their dual recording of Naima, which is beautiful, with Dolphy on bass clarinet and Coltrane on soprano sax. It's just that was the first thing that came to my mind once the second song, Landmarks, started playing. And I just kept that idea in my mind. And also, another thing that I've kind of found in this album was that a lot of the songs, while on previous Fellowship Band, Brian Blade recordings like Season of Changes, they would kind of go from this, sometimes had a bit of a fusion element to them that was kind of consistent, though sometimes it would fade away to some more straight ahead jazz. On this album, while a lot of it had this kind of consistent push, this really wholesome, beautiful, soulful push, there were these individual songs which were kind of thrown in, specifically at the beginning. The songs they're very specific. They were all about 1 minute, just under a minute long. The first song on the album is one of them, Downriver. The third song, State Lines. Shenandoah, the fifth song's kind of like this, but at that point they started to fade away. The end of Arc LA Tex, if that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure, definitely had this, where it was just kind of almost like an ambiance setting kind of sound to it. It was just kind of like one kind of drone kind of going. I'm not sure exactly what instrument was being played. I believe it was one of the instruments John Cowherd was playing. But I was not a big fan of that, especially at the beginning. As it went on, it kind of mixed better with the album, with the other songs, but especially opening up the album with Downriver, I feel like Landmarks just would have been a great opening if they started there with such a great song and just a powerful opening. But Downriver, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what Blade was trying to convey with that in the Fellowship Band, but personally I wasn't a big fan of it. But honestly, I'd say that's one of my only criticisms of this album. It's really Blade and Chris Smith, the bassist, stay very locked in together on these just beautiful. They're both so great at their instruments that they can completely be just going on their own. Just really just like what at first glance or first hearing might just sound like them just going up under a soloist. But then they're just so rooted right next to each other. They're so rooted together through this whole thing that they really power this album. I mean, Brian Blade's drumming, I'm sure if you're listening to this review, you know Brian Blade's drumming is fantastic. It's out of this world. And I really got to see a lot of that here. And I'd definitely say, one of the final things I'll say is that the feeling of this album at certain points, like on Arc LA Tex, which is one of the bigger songs from the album, the more known ones, they've got this kind of feel where it's almost like the Wayne Shorter Quartet, which Blade is a part of and has been since the beginning, a long time ago, and almost Snarky Puppy kind of feel. We're kind of like mixed together. If you took the Wayne Shorter Quartet and Snarky Puppy and kind of like took some of the elements from both of those and put them together, that's really the feeling I got on a lot of the songs in this album. It's this very kind of like, you have kind of like the free kind of like flowing, just beautiful lines coming up from the drums and the bass and the sax, just any instrument, regardless of what its traditional role is. But while the Wayne Shorter Quartet, it's great that they do this, but it wasn't particularly. It's great that they do this, where they kind of don't really root their music in like a really solid like groove under it. Sometimes, like they'll kind of start a groove, but then it'll kind of like flow away. The music's never truly like rooted in one place, which is great. It's really cool that they can do that. It takes a lot of talent to do that. But combining those kind of flowing aspects with Snarky Puppy's like kind of like they're a very rooted band. Like Michael League's bass is kind of like really the main line through all of their songs, and it's like if you took the greatness of just the free flowing from the Wayne Shorter Quartet and combined it with some of the better parts of Snarky Puppy's kind of like really great ability to just kind of keep all the instruments, whether they're horns or rhythm section instruments, kind of like rooted in this one groove, and a lot of really cool grooves that they use. This album really takes both of those and merges them together. And also, some of John Cowherd's solos on piano really reminded me of some of the Keys solos from some Snarky Puppy songs. I can't think of any in particular, but some of their stuff on Ground Up and We Like It Here was very reminiscent of that. So yeah, this album was great. It really, I'll definitely be listening to a few of the songs again. At some point, probably I'll just go through this whole album again. It really has one main sound to it. And so don't go into this album expecting to get all these different types of like showcases of genres and things of this album. It's really this one sound, which is very specific to the Brian Blade Quartet. I would probably say I like Season of Changes more than this album, but this album is still great. It's very different. It's very individual. They work great together. If I had to give it a rating out of 10, while I wouldn't consider this very important, I guess I'd probably go with a solid 8 out of 10. Yeah, it was a great album. It kept a bit too much sameness for me. I kind of really wish that it explored more, but it did such a good job at exploring the sound that it did explore that, I mean, this album, I gotta give it an 8 out of 10. Thanks for listening. I'll probably be getting to do a few more reviews of the Fellowship Band's music soon, and definitely I'll be doing some reviews of the Wayne Shorter Quartet and some of Brian Blade's other projects. All right, thank you.